I am so thrilled to welcome you all to the second session of our Spring Network at Work series. Today is Value You, Frontloading Your Values Throughout Your Career Exploration with Emily Frank, class of 93. Before I introduce Emily and we start our session today, I wanted to take a moment to share a bit about these workshops, which are a key element of our Smith Business Network programming. Network at Work events are virtual, interactive workshops offering professional skill building and networking with your fellow Smithies. This spring, we're focusing on the Great Resignation, which refers to the widespread disruption in workplaces across sectors. And Emily's session today is the second of 3 workshops we will offer on this topic. This disruption presents an opportunity to reimagine your path. Our hope is that you will come away from these workshops with concrete tips and tools that you can leverage to feel grounded and reach your professional goals. We also hope you will come away from our time together today with new connections to your fellow Smithies. As I mentioned, there are over 60 of us here today, and we have 90 minutes with each other to learn together and connect with one another. But today is really only the beginning. In the Smith Business Network, we're building careers, we're facilitating connection, and we are leaning into our community. And this community, our Smith Network, is a powerful resource of support we all have access to as Smith alums and for the rest of our lives. Everything you need to thrive professionally exists within the Smith Network. Emily, for example, is case in point. And we'll provide you with opportunities like our session today to put this network to work for you. So without further ado, I'll introduce our host for today's session, Emily Frank, class of 1993. Emily is a professional career counselor with over 15 years of experience in both higher education and private practice. She's a certified career coach and Myers-Briggs master practitioner. She also has 4 years of living, studying, and working abroad. She counsels coaches on career fit, resumes, cover letters, interviewing, salary negotiation, and workplace self-advocacy. She is also available to give advice to entrepreneurs. In addition to building her business in Denver, Colorado, Emily is also one of our Smith Business Network partner coaches. So she offers special services to Smith alums. Each Friday, Emily hosts a free weekly career Q&A over Zoom, open to all 7 sister alums. In addition to that, she offers one-on-one coaching sessions for Smithies at a discounted rate. So if you're interested in connecting with Emily for one-on-one career coaching, please reach out. So now I'll turn it over to Emily to get our workshop started.
All right. Thank you so much for that intro there, Christy. I am going to share my screen here. So give me just a moment. All right. When you're in the middle of a career shift, as a lot of people are, during this big quit, as it's also called, as Christy mentioned, I think one of the really key things is that we get to do a little bit of a delve into what's important to us. And the people I've been working with recently who are coming to me specifically because of this Great Resignation are talking a lot about things like their skills. But I do also want to acknowledge that these other pieces are obviously still important to consider. You have things like unique skills, an interesting background, successes in your career path up until this point. And so these are all really important, but skills are the kinds of things that obviously you can learn. And education is something you can add on. And you can also put some spin on all of these things in something like a resume. But what I always say is that your skills your values are the most important part of figuring out what's next for you because they're really a deep part of who you are. So I'm going to really talk a lot about values today. And I just want to really quickly mention this kind of nerdy thing here. When we're talking about satisfaction at work, there are these 2 primary buckets that career counselors talk about. So these are the intrinsic and extrinsic satisfiers. So the intrinsic satisfiers are the pieces that are really directly related to the work itself. So that's, the kinds of work you're doing, who you get to help in your work, having decision-making capacity over your own role, feeling a sense of accomplishment, getting to build new skills. The extrinsic satisfiers are the sort of things you get from the work. So that would be things like, how much do you get paid? Who are your colleagues? Where do you work? Do you have work from home options? What are your benefits? All of those. And what's really important to note about this is that we all need stuff in each of these buckets, but the specific balance will really change from person to person. So I work, for instance, with some people who are really kind of over in the extrinsic bucket a lot more. So they need things like, enough money to help pay for their parents' housing and that sort of thing. And so we focus more there. For most of us, it's a bit of a balance, but this is just kind of a little nerdy piece of information for you all. So why are values important? Why are we even having this discussion? This can feel a tiny bit selfish when you're sort of thinking about, well, how about me? How do I fit into this? But it's truly not, because if you are more satisfied in your job, then you're going to do better work in your job. You're going to have more energy to dedicate to the work that you do. You'll find deeper meaning. You will have more motivation to continue growing. You'll build relationships better with your colleagues, and so on and so forth. I won't read all of these to you, but so just a quick note that this is actually really important in terms of your performance in your job, as well as to your own satisfaction and happiness. I also just want to say that even if it's a little bit selfish, there's nothing wrong with that. You also deserve to be happy in your job. But to balance it out, there are all of these benefits that happen when you're really kind of working within your own structure and system of values. And, we definitely all want to be positive and adaptable. And if you are generally happy with your work, and you have a little stretch of time when you're not these things, you're just kind of worn out, then that is something that you can fix fairly easily by just taking a vacation, as opposed to feeling deeply unhappy with everything, which it's pretty tough to fix. It's kind of an unfixable situation at that point. So how do you even figure out what your values are? Well, most of you, I hope, got the worksheet that we sent out ahead of time. I do have some of it on a slide here as well. But really, all you do is you make a list of the stuff that's really important to you. And then I recommend scoring it. I've suggested here 1 to 10. It does not need to be that. You can do 1 through 5. You can do whatever you want. But the idea is you want to have a way to kind of scale things so that this thing here is more important than this thing here. So for instance, if you would really like to get paid super well for your work, but it's not totally essential to you, then salary, you can still score as important. You just won't score it as the most important. And then I do recommend that you also do a little bit of, as much as you can, trying to rank things in order of importance. And the worksheet that you all got, it has you narrow it down to, I think it's your top 5. This isn't a rule, and 5 is a somewhat arbitrary number, but I do think it's important to get a really good, clear focus on what your most essential values are, because those are the things that we really need to pay a lot of attention to as you're moving forward. And I think there's a fairly big temptation often with these things to downplay some things that are really important to us because they maybe seem a little bit frivolous, or because we've gotten this message that work is something that we don't particularly enjoy doing, so you're not supposed to. And so do pay a lot of attention to those, because that is an untrue story that we have been told, and something that I would really encourage you to reject as much as possible. And if you are just not a good fit in terms of values with a workplace, you're going to find that you will burn out pretty quickly, that you won't be putting your best effort into it, that you'll start feeling really dissatisfied with it, et cetera, et cetera. And so none of that is worthwhile. So let me just give you a few quick examples of some things that are often important values for people. So you see here, this is kind of a random selection of things. And on the worksheet, there are very intentionally no definitions of any of these pieces. So the example I often give is I have autonomy on the list as a potential value. And I'm not going to tell you what autonomy means because I'm self-employed. My bar for autonomy is probably a little bit artificially high. I do all of the things. I have a web development team and someone who does my taxes for me, but everything else I do. So I have a weird bar for autonomy, but you also get to decide what yours is. So that can mean things like you think through like what was the last role you had where you got some autonomy or some independence or some responsibility. What did that look like and how did it make you feel? So you can also make some personal notes about these things as you're going through the list. And these worksheets are just yours to do with what you will. So feel free to keep a copy. You may want to take this quiz again at a later point. You might look back over it a day later and change your mind about things. It's all for you. So do whatever you want with it. But if you got the worksheet, go ahead and pull it out now. And I think we're going to share it in the chat as well if you didn't get it. And then I have a slide that has the info on it. So I'm going to give you just a moment or two here to look through this if you haven't already. I won't spend too long kind of letting you fill this out. But if you haven't already done it, just take a moment to note a few of these. And you don't have to go through the whole thing right now. So don't feel like you have to rank everything and pull out your top 5. But take a moment here, if you would. Look over these and pull out a couple of things that are really essential to you in terms of your values. And I'm going to mute myself and drink some tea for just a moment while I give you a second to do this. All right, I'm going to hop back in because I want to be sure that we have plenty of time for discussion here. But hopefully, if you hadn't done this before, you got a chance to really start thinking about what is really important to you. And I want to emphasize here for a second that you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. You might, but you shouldn't feel uncomfortable with any of this because it's really just your own satisfiers that we're looking at here. So I'll take prestige, for example. I do work with a lot of people who begrudgingly acknowledge that they have a lot of value around prestige, but they feel a little bit uncomfortable about that because it seems like it's maybe a little bit, self-focused or frivolous. But, prestige, first of all, you get to define prestige. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you work for a Fortune 500 company or that you have a job title like COO. So it can be prestige as you define it. So for instance, if you are a K-12 educator, your idea of prestige can be that your colleagues know you as a really good teacher. And they might even come to you with questions that they have about a difficult student. So these are all really normal, healthy values. And I definitely encourage you to be super honest with yourself as you're filling this out and really think about how each component works for you and where some of the jobs you've had in the past that weren't a good fit have fallen short here. Because this is really about you. And we get to really lean into all of this kind of fabulous stuff about you. And so, for instance, I have been in roles where I didn't get the kind of recognition that I really wanted from the role. I got recognized, but it wasn't in the way that made me feel good. And so, you can also add some detail to it. But as I said, this is yours to work with. So don't feel like you have to do all of it now. And then I can get the slide to advance here. Cool. I don't know why my slides are being grumpy. There we go. So then how do you plan around your career with those values front of mind? Well, a few things that you can do are here listed here. We will have a follow-up worksheet for you that will help kind of guide you through some of this, but I do think it's important to set goals. And here's a really important part of that. these are not written in stone. So don't be afraid to set goals if you are concerned that you might change your mind later about them. That is totally fine. At one point I was in grad school and I set a goal for myself of going through the whole licensure process that people in professional counseling generally need to have. But as I explored a little bit more about what that looked like and kind of what the process was, and learned that in career, it's not necessarily something that we focus on, I decided it didn't make very much sense to me. And it's not that I scoff at people who are, the licensure is called LPC, or Licensed Professional Counselor. I have great respect for people who take the LPC exam and stay certified and maintain their licensure, but it didn't make sense for me because, among other things, you have to do some stuff to maintain your licensure that just didn't seem interesting to me. I think there's a teaching component to it, and there's an attending classes component to it. And it just seemed kind of onerous. So I set it as a goal for myself. And then later on, I changed my mind and I replaced that goal with another. So don't worry about feeling like you can't meet some of these goals or feeling like they might change. Get really clear, super clear on your values. Those are unlikely to change, although the order in which you list them for yourself and the degree of importance might change a little bit. But something that's totally unimportant to you now is not going to swim to the top. So you're not going to say, I'm super non-competitive. I don't want that. That's a really low value for me. You're not going to wake up in a week and think, I am so competitive. So be just really clear on those. And same thing, you can change them as you need to. As you're going through this, one of the things you'll also really want to do is identify your obstacles. And here's why it's important to identify them. Often when we're at a point of change in our lives, we get a little bit stuck in the idea of the obstacle or the what if. And so I'll be talking to people, for instance, who say things like, well, but what if I need a graduate degree for that? I don't know. What if you do need a graduate degree for that? Do you know you need a graduate degree for that? Let's explore it, right? We throw up these kind of worst case scenario obstacles for ourselves pretty often. And a lot of it is to do with our own measures of success and kind of how we gauge our own progress in our careers. Some of it is suggestions from well-meaning people, and some of it is just plain anxiety. So think about what the obstacles are, and then once you know them, you can come up with ways to overcome them. So let's say, for instance, you're interested in becoming a project manager. One of the things you'll see if you go around kind of poking around online and looking at project manager job descriptions is that a lot of them these days are requiring the PMP, or project management professional, I think it is, certificate. And so people will get a little bit stuck on that. Well, I don't have that. I guess I can't apply for those jobs. The thing is, there are actually some pretty affordable classes you can take so that you can pass the exam. It's apparently a bit of a bear of an exam. So you'll want to take some classes for it. But there are actually some quite affordable ways that you can do that. The other thing we can do, if that's really where you want to go, is we can mentally flag that as a sort of desired qualification. But the truth is, it's not actually necessary. People have been doing this work for decades. We just didn't necessarily have a title for it. So we can also figure out, and potentially together, we might figure this out, some ways that you can really demonstrate that you've been doing project management. You just don't have that particular piece of paper that says you can do it. And what that may wind up meaning is that you get a role somewhere and then ask them to pay for you to take the classes to pass the exam. So there are a lot of ideas like that that we can kind of brainstorm together, or you can brainstorm by yourself or with friends to really figure out how to overcome some of those obstacles. I also have a kind of a neat tool in the follow-up worksheet that we will send out to you. And then ideally, as you go through this process, you will establish a kind of loose timeline for yourself. Much as with the goals, this doesn't have to be anything that is set in stone. This is just really a basic kind of guideline for yourself. If we decide we're going to do a thing and we don't put any particular time boundaries on it, the thing gets really easy to push back and push back and push back. And so I like to set kind of loose guidelines for myself, and I'll put in due dates on my calendar so that I'm a little bit more intentional about making progress, about setting time aside to work on whatever it is, that sort of thing. And of course, you can customize the timeline as you need to. You know, nobody exactly planned for a global pandemic that set everything back 2.5 years. And so a lot of us had to change some of our timelines. I have still not launched the class I keep promising myself I'm going to launch, because things got all kinds of crazy in there. And so I gave myself permission to adjust my timeline based on the fact that at the beginning of the pandemic, what I wound up doing was a whole lot of marketing my business, because nobody wanted to part with their money early on in this thing. So loose timeline, but do definitely put some goals in place for yourself around the what and the when. All right. We are going to be heading into breakout rooms here in a moment, but these are some discussion points that I would like you all to keep in mind. So just real briefly and without overthinking it, your top value, a thing you will not tolerate in the workplace, and how these kinds of things have presented themselves in your life up until now. And I will make a quick note here that the thing you won't tolerate from a workplace can be a little bit silly. Years and years ago, when I was working with a career counselor my own self, P.S., that is how I got into this role. One of the things she asked me was exactly that question. What's a thing that's a hard no? What will you not tolerate? I thought about it for a second, and then I had my answer. And I said, you know what it is? It's pantyhose. And it wasn't simply the pantyhose themselves, although I don't like them. I find them uncomfortable. It was also what they represented. To me, a pantyhose job is a job where you go into a giant office building and there's like special elevators to go to the different floors, and there's like big marble lobbies and giant intimidating floral displays and a bank of receptionists who are gatekeepers, and that whole kind of corporate-y setting. And that is definitely not how I am built. And so that was my shorthand, no corporate settings. So it can be a little bit silly like that. It could also just be that you hate pantyhose and find them constricting. That is totally a fine answer as well. So let the thing you won't tolerate be kind of fun and kind of engaging. I also wanted to throw my contact info here into the slides, just in case any of you have any questions. As Christy mentioned, I do have a special Seven Sisters rate. I'm wearing my fancy Seven Sisters scarf. I don't know if you can see it here. And I'd be glad to work with any of you. And if you just have a quick question, don't be shy. I definitely encourage you to email me. I would love to see how I can be of help to you. So let me pop back into the questions here. And we can go into our breakout rooms.
I hope you all enjoyed your time together. So now we're going to move to debriefing the discussions you all had. So I'm going to go ahead and call on the folks who hosted breakout rooms to share the high level discussion, like themes from the discussion you had. And then we're also going to have a little bit of time at the end. If anyone has specific questions, you can drop those in the chat now, or we can, get to those when we finish debriefing, and we'll have time for Emily to answer some of those questions as well. So to get us started, Alexis Claire, can you share out some of the discussion from your breakout room?
Thank you, Chrissy. Great group. Great conversation, and many thanks again to Emily for leading us through this. Kind of our 3 general points was that it was just wonderful to have the chance to do this reflection work. Unless we have opportunities like this, we don't always take the time to look at this list of values or think about where am I in my life and what do I like in my job, what don't I like. So it's really great to have this space to be able to do this work. So many thanks from my group. The theme that resonated, a value that resonated, was changing the world and helping. That was not surprising with a group of Smithies, but really cool to see that stood out for a lot of us. And the ways that, like, we all talked about our jobs a little bit and how it showed up in so many different ways. And so it's really amazing to see the different ways that people can help. And then finally, I would say the question we were just tackling right at the end was, this list of values is wonderful, but then how do you translate it when you're reading a job description? Or how do you translate it when you're looking over the website of an organization or a company? So we were starting to talk through what does that look like? So
yeah, it's an excellent question. And I can speak a little bit to it. I won't go too into detail, but hi, Gail. But I will say that one of the things that you can do is see kind of what a company's general presence is. So you can check out what they're saying on social media. You can look at, if there's a board of directors, you can look at the board, which doesn't necessarily get into those values, but will give you a sense of a little bit of how they are trying to bring diversity in. So a few little things like that. And then beyond that, there's often not a whole lot you can do, because a lot of places will say the right things kind of according to your values. But what you can do is, if you get an interview, have a list of questions around those specific values of yours, especially those top 5-ish, the ones that are most essential to you, and ask around them. So for instance, if you've decided that work-life balance is really important, you can have a question when you're being interviewed that's, hey, so this pandemic has really made me realize how important work-life balance is to me. What does it look like at this organization? And you know, what examples can you give me of that? Because often if you just ask, they'll give you a line. It's not always quite meaty enough to have real meaning behind it. So then you can always push a little more and ask for those examples. Sort of some of it. Happy to talk to anyone who has deeper questions about that, because it is really important stuff.
Yeah.
Yay,
Thanks,
Breakout
Emily. And I imagine too that, you know, you could look into your Smith network and maybe find someone who is experienced in that field or at that organization, and, you know, ask around. The power of networking is a strong thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Alexis Claire. That's great. Ann Witzel, can you share the discussion from your
Yes,
group?
I'd love to. We had such a great diverse group of classes and ages, and so values, although they were very similar, and I concur that this kind of collaborative spirit and working with organizations that have mission, helping the world, was definitely shared by everyone. We had folks who were had young children, so work-life balance was a clear value, and at that stage in her life. And for another one, the opportunity for advancement and being recognized for good work that they were doing was really critical, and had to turn down jobs, or is looking for one because of an opportunity that she couldn't take. But what people didn't want ranged from everything from not bringing work home, so that you were being taken for granted and underappreciated for doing work that was kind of not expected, being micromanaged, just eroding your self-confidence, hypocrisy in the workplace, where people were feeling like they were privileged and doing great work, but others were unrecognized, and politics, or no mission. Those were all toxic, which we were using the term toxic privilege quite a bit, and I thought it was really apt for some of the discussions we were having. And I think we really came down to, being this mission-driven resonated with a lot of people. We talked a little bit at the end about how at different stages in your life, values will change, and that's fine. And it's the way it should be. And to be really honest with your values when you're going through the different stages and different needs at those times is really critical. What we did not discuss, and I did just throw it in the chat, was just how you can how you can talk about a corporate culture, how you can understand what a corporate culture might be before you get into it. And so there were some thoughts thrown there in the chat. But great group, really diverse stages. It's wonderful.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. And the comments in the chat have been really fabulous. So I love that. And to some of these points. So definitely the Smith Network is super powerful. Definitely tap into that because people are so kind and giving and really want to help everybody else succeed. And there are definitely some parts of the job description and some parts of some of those, like I mentioned, the code words like family, that you can kind of learn the code around. I also, I will tend to go to places like Glassdoor. I'm a little frustrated with Glassdoor right now because they make you give information in order to see information, which it's kind of fair in theory, but I'm self-employed. I don't know what I can tell them. Career Catalyst is the best workplace ever. So, but they do, if you are willing to share like a salary range or a question you got asked in an interview, and you can actually see some of this stuff based on the questions people have been asked in their interviews. People will also tell you some stuff like, I also, Kate, I'm right there with you. I will generally, not that I'm looking for jobs, but I would always avoid the ones that had family in the description. It often means, for instance, that they don't want to pay for birth control, which just really deeply offends me, even though I'm 50. My need for birth control is very low right now, but just the idea really offends me. And then I also have generally avoided the kinds of places that do random drug testing, just out of a sense of that's not right. It feels really invasive to me. I don't care if they're, testing pilots for that sort of thing, but most of us, it feels invasive to me. So you can kind of figure out what those hard no's are for you as well by looking at some of those questions and reaching out. And I'll say also, when you're looking for people to connect with, don't be shy about connecting with, say, a Mount Holyoke alum. If you see someone who looks really interesting, has a really interesting job title at the kind of place you want to work, because the Seven Sister groups. And so someone mentioned Smithies, hiring Smithies on Facebook. There's also a Sisters Hiring Seven Sisters Facebook group, same kind of thing, where you can get tons of really great feedback from some of your fabulous siblings out there.
Yeah. And Emily, you just opened the door for me to remind people to join our LinkedIn group, which we hope will also be that kind of supportive community space, sharing advice and just a real kind of, and being on LinkedIn, that being such a professionally geared space. I think I'm excited that group is growing. We're at 3,800 members now. So join us. We'll put the link in the chat and in our follow-up emails as well. But this is excellent. And Emily, too, about Glassdoor, I've also seen this new app called Fishbowl that I need to look into a little bit more. But that seems to have a similar kind of feel, and it's completely anonymous. So people give much more candid feedback about their work environments and what they like and don't like about their current jobs. So something that's new and still requires a little bit of investigating, but another place to look and get some feedback from folks. Okay, we'll go now to Amy to share from room 3.
Sure. Well, thank you. I think we probably talked about many of the same things. Some of the top values for people were creativity and autonomy and having intellectually demanding work and a variety of work. So, and we had a variety of ages too. So it was really good to hear from different perspectives. I really like the term, I wrote down toxic privilege. That's a really interesting term that will stay in my lexicon for sure. And when we talked about what we won't tolerate, what we realized was we were really talking about sort of the emotional stuff that we won't tolerate. Being talked down to, being devalued, being disrespected, or a lack of respect sort of generally in the workplace. So those were all really important priorities for people to avoid. And echoing what, as Anne mentioned, the different priorities at different stages in life, and thinking too about sort of what our priorities would have been in the before times, pre-pandemic. How have things shifted? Because, and a lot of my colleagues have heard me say this many, many times, but as hard as the last 2 years have been, and they've been just ghastly in so many ways, we've also been presented with a lot of opportunities. And I think the Great Resignation, that sense that people are much more willing to look and investigate and think about moving in different directions, it's clear from our group and from what I'm hearing from all of you too. So we talked some about how things have manifested, or how these things have presented themselves. But I think that sense of having new opportunities and moving away from what is not fulfilling is we didn't identify, sorry, I'm stumbling over it, but we didn't identify sort of specific examples, but it was more just this sense of wanting to just move in new directions. So probably very common in a lot of the groups.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I love that you talked about the before times.
Yeah. Great. We're going to keep it moving because I realize it's 2:15. We got a couple more people to get through. So Kate, can you share from your group?
Sure. I just want to thank first everybody for putting together this conversation, and also our group, people who are really candid. I think everyone is in the group is in a stage of transition. And, I thought there was a really great framing that Elaine and our group mentioned. Instead of the great, resignation, it's the great exploration. And that, in the before times, maybe you were just doing things one step in front of the other and everything. And then part of the last 2 years, massive shakeup has been, what do you value the most? What fulfills you, and looking for those opportunities. So when we talked about values, we were really centering things like authenticity. So being in a space, being in a workplace, having colleagues that are having authentic conversations, or doing work that is moving a needle where you can see the results of your work. You are connecting with people to do something meaningful, whatever that means. And then, in terms of what we just say no to, besides hard pants, is that lack of respect, that lack of balance. So I think everybody, it sounded like, was in a real space of thinking through what they value most, thinking about what they didn't currently have in their life, and where they might be able to find it. So we did talk about, in terms of next steps, thinking about what are some new paths that may not have been considered. You may have been on one path and made some choices that now, at this point of reflection, you are a different person now. You want different things, or you always wanted them and just didn't know you could act on them until maybe this point. So programs like this, we exchanged some resources. We pointed out the Facebook groups. I mean, I don't know how many Smith Facebook groups there are, but there is one for every one of your interests. And just like, how do you, I don't love this phrase, but I think it is effective, like refill your cup. Who do you turn to support your explorations, to help you build a network of support that you can turn to, whether it's personal and professional. And we kind of ended that conversation with a little bit of thinking, like, we want the two halves of the whole to fit better. Your work life over here and your, home life over here, but maybe there can be something that is more closely aligned and reflective of values. So it was a really great and candid conversation. Thank you for everyone for contributing and for giving us some ideas about how we can sort of build the lives we want more.
That's the goal, Kate. That is totally the goal. And thank you again for setting me up to share that our next in this series is about how you can identify your transferable skills for a pivot. So join us for that one on April 5th. And hopefully we'll be able to dive even more into that kind of what do we do now if we're ready for a change kind of a conversation. Thank you so much, Kate. Sarah, can you share from your group, please?
Yeah, my group had a really good conversation. Again, folks were from a broad spectrum of places in their life. And it was a great time to chat and get to know each other a little bit. One of the things that we were honing in around was that what we are looking for in a career is not always based on prestige or the money. It is really about this balance in life. It is like really in those values. And even when sometimes like a job can be very value rich, but sometimes there are still those non-negotiables that are present that create even those values become not worth it. And it's learning how to know where those non-negotiables are to like not allow that to happen and don't fall for like the shiny, sparkly offer that you're willing to make deep compromises on. And that kind of goes into our other piece around receiving respect and also self-respect. And so in this idea of both showing up for ourselves and building careers and choosing options that are really rich in our values, that can create and hone in on this feeling of self-respect and this feeling of being able to show up for ourselves and do what we need for our families and for our communities. And that in and of itself is a really powerful thing that as Smithies we were given and we continue to like foster and embrace. But then as like a non-negotiable, that also means as we're fostering this self-respect and this strength that like, it's a non-negotiable if people disrespect us. It's a non-negotiable if we're not valued and we deserve those things. And that's how, whether we're showing up for ourselves in our own business or we are showing up and as like in a role, both of those demand that like we are treated with the value that we deserve and what we're bringing to the table. And so that was a really big piece of our conversation. And then the last part was really just this idea around camaraderie, community, and collaboration, where we're not in a bubble. And prior to the pandemic, kind of going into this, like it has kind of really shown us how we need to connect and we need to be working together, and that there is a lot of good that comes from working in community and collaboration, even if we sometimes are in our own little world as part of our values. That tether is really important for us.
Wonderful, Sarah. I love that. Community, we're all about it. Okay, Christine, can you share out from your group?
I will. And I want to thank the group, first of all, because you guys were a really rich and engaging set of experiences that you're all willing to share. So really terrific group. Again, a lot of what we talked about has been reflected in other groups' conversations, and I know that we're pressed for time, so I won't repeat any of those things, but the values around people and respect and authenticity and creativity and making a difference is, very much a part of sort of, it seems like the ethos of this and, all the participants of this seminar. Aside from a really funny opener to the second question around what you can't tolerate in a group, what you can't tolerate in a situation, when someone opened with nudity. And then explained that she was an actress, and they gave us that context. But that was not one that I was anticipating needing to facilitate around. So it was good to keep me on my toes. But again, that whole concept of understanding what matters to you and what matters to you at a particular point in time. We had a lot of it wove in and out of the conversation around that evolves as you evolve and the rest of your life plays out. And the concept of kind of agency and choice around that, that even when bad things happen to you, when you're treated, when you have a values violation, if you will, that can be clarifying. It can help you realize just how important that is to you and how you go ahead and make sure that you do get that in some aspect of your life or work. The other really interesting concept that hasn't been discussed yet, so I want to bring it up here, is the notion of understanding your values enough to figure out that it's so important to you that maybe you're going to do work that doesn't check all the boxes for your values, because that job enables you to check a big life box around your values. And so again, the interplay, a different spin on the interplay between your work life and your outside of work life. So again, a really rich conversation with lots of different perspectives based on where people were. And I think a big takeaway was being open to exploring the value of being open to exploring at different points in your lives, roles that play to your different values. And that's part of the ongoing clarification process that you have in life. And it was a great conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Christine. I love that. You get bits and pieces of information that kind of guide you, whether it's positive or negative. It's all data, right? That you can use to inform your future decisions. And so we hope you don't get too many values violations to set you on that path. Okay, Laura, you're up with our last group.
Thank you. And like others have said, there are obviously some very common themes here. So I'm just going to highlight, especially with the time, just some things that might be bring something fresh to the conversation. But first, I just want to mention that like other groups, we had lots of folks who were at all different stages of their career. But something that really struck us all was the commonality of everyone was leaving their job because it just didn't fit their life anymore. And whether that meant it was because they were having children, or the Great Resignation was part of it, shifting priorities, work-life balance. I mean, all these things are related, but it just struck us that everyone's sort of leaving for the same thing. In terms of the must-haves, we had some great answers that we've heard from others before. Creativity, long-term sustainability of a position is something that I didn't hear other groups say that I thought was really interesting. Also, we had this a short discussion. One of the group members brought up this idea of thriving under pressure, and sort of this idea that like competition, but in a positive context, not in so much competing with others, but this idea of having an environment where you can put yourself out there to receive feedback in a positive way. And that's something I think we don't hear about a lot, but it's really important. So I wanted to bring that up. And then finally, just to wrap it up, the things to not tolerate. Nakedness was not one of them, but I'm sure we would probably agree with that. But yeah, disrespect. They were all sort of around a toxic workplace. So disrespect, talking behind people's back, having a functional team was important, not tolerating stress. So those were sort of, and those are things that other groups said as well. But yeah, just to reinforce that one. Thanks. We had a great group. Thanks, everybody. Oh, and actually one quick thing just to add, I had a suggestion from the group actually that that the organizers have either like a monthly or an every 2 weeks breakout room where people can just come and chat about all of this. Our group had such a good time and such similarities, they want to do it again. So anyway, that's just a thought. I don't know if that's something that I wanted to put that out there.
I'm having technical difficulties over here. My headphones just died. Oh no. So I can't hear anything right now, which is, hold on one second. Okay, I think I might be back.
All right, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear now. Thank you. Sorry about that. Of course, it dies right at the end. That was so great. I am so thrilled that everyone had such a wonderful discussion. It sounds like it was really enriching. I just want to go ahead. Yeah, Laura, I didn't hear what you said at the end there, but Ashley is on it and we will follow up. I'm so sorry. So just wanted to quickly, as we're wrapping up, thank all of you for being here. It's been so wonderful to have you. Emily, thank you so much for hosting this discussion. It's so
Thank you.
Oh yeah, it's so fun to have you here and to have you within our network. And I just want to mention again, Emily does offer special Smithy coaching at a special Smith rate one-on-one. So we will be sharing Emily's email in the follow-up thank you note you'll get this week. And you'll be able to reach out to her if you're interested in either reaching out to her for that one-on-one coaching or for being in touch about the weekly career calls that are more of a group style. I also wanted to mention again our LinkedIn group. I put it in the chat. I saw about 15 people from this session who joined. Thank you. We're growing that group. We want that to be a space for community and support. So please join us there. And then finally, as I mentioned, we have one more of these events coming up on April 5th. That will be with Gail Fritzinger, who is on this call too. Another great career transition specialist we have within the Smith Network. And she will be hosting a session on career transitions and how to pivot and identify your transferable skills. All of these really build on one another. So we hope you'll join us there. And we'll have a link to register for that event in the thank you email as well. So lots more coming your way. And, thank you as well. One more thing, for completing the survey, you'll get in that email too. Let us know how we did. Let us know what you want to see more of and how we can make these even more aligned with what you're looking for from Smith. We really want to be a resource for all of you to find one another, to connect, and to gain some real concrete skills. So with that, we'll say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you all again soon. Make sure you connect with each other, LinkedIn, everywhere. This is your network. Okay. Bye, everyone.